Junk Dog was a starving loser throwing fixed fights in the slums until the day he got his teeth kicked in by a rigged match and nearly died in the dirt. But when Yuri, the undefeated Megalobox champion, stepped into the ring and humiliated him in front of the whole underground, something inside him snapped. Since that day, he decided to crawl his way out of the gutter to prove himself. But before any of this, Megaloboxing is a new kind of boxing in the future, where fighters wear gear to make their punches stronger. Yukiko Shirato, the boss of the Shirato group, tells everyone about it because it was her grandpa's dream to see boxing become even better. To make that dream real, she talks about a huge megaloboxing tournament called Megalonia. She says fighters from all over the world will join, but only 4 of them will get into the final part of the tournament. She also says it will start in 3 months, so people need to get ready soon. Meanwhile, a guy walks inside a motorcycle shop to fix his bike where he watches Shirato Group's presentation about Megalonia and an undefeated champion. The guy asks the old man if he misses boxing, but the old man says no because they don't have ID cards, so they're not even real citizens. Turns out, the guy doesn't have a real name, he just goes by his ring name, Junk Dog. He is a megaloboxer who takes part in illegal underground fights, where the matches are fixed. He does all this under the watch of Gansaku Nanbu, who guides and manages him. Junk Dog visits the underground fight club and as soon as he gets there, the bouncers tell him that he's supposed to lose tonight. Hearing this makes him really mad, so he storms off to talk to Nanbu about it. When he finds him, he asks why he has to lose on purpose. Nanbu says he got bored of Junk Dog always winning and besides, it wasn't bringing in enough money. Soon after, the match begins and Junk Dog's opponent is a skinny guy who looks like a rough version of Prince Charles, named Geto Hachiya. In the early rounds, Hachiya beats him up pretty badly because of his gear and because Junk Dog isn't going all out as he's still holding himself back. In the end, Junk Dog loses pretty badly after getting a bad hit in the face. Later that evening, Junk Dog almost crashes his motorcycle into Yukiko Shirato, the leader of the Shirato group that runs the Megalonia tournament. Yukiko offers to pay for any damage but Junk Dog turns her down and instead, angrily says that the Megalonia tournament isn't real megalo boxing. His words annoy Yuri, who is Yukiko's bodyguard, and he gets upset at how disrespectful Junk Dog is being toward his boss. Junk Dog picks a fight with Yuri as he wants to feel what real megalo boxing is like. Yuri gives off a strong and serious vibe that gets Junk Dog even more excited, but before they can start, Yukiko steps in and stops the fight. Later on, when Junk Dog is getting ready to face his next opponent, something unexpected happens. Yuri walks into the ring instead. Everyone watching is shocked because Yuri is the current Megalobox champion and he showed up without Yukiko's permission. Nanbu tries to stop the match from happening but Junk Dog punches him out of the ring, saying he wants to face Yuri using only his own strength. Nanbu can't stop the match between Junk Dog and Yuri as the boss of the underground ring gives the green light, saying they've never had such a big event before and don't want to miss the chance. Knowing he can't change things, Nanbu warns Junk Dog to give up if his cheeks hit the mat, or he could lose everything. As the match is about to start, Yuri begins mocking Joe by calling out for his name, making it sound even worse on purpose to get under his skin. After that, Junk Dog charges at Yuri, throwing punches with everything he's got but Yuri's reflexes are so sharp that he dodges every move with ease. Yuri then lands a quick jab that completely stops Junk Dog's momentum. To make things more fair, Yuri decides to fight using only one hand, but Junk Dog fights so hard that Yuri ends up using both hands anyway. Even with all his effort, Junk Dog gets almost knocked out in the first round by a clean but messy jab straight to the face, but he still stands up to fight. Junk Dog then manages to land a jab right on Yuri's face, which surprises everyone and makes Yuri really angry. Yuri then decides to stop holding back and show Junk Dog what real megalo boxing looks like. Right after that, Yuri throws a strong jab straight at Junk Dog's face, knocking him out cold in the first round. Afterward, Junk Dog gets back on his feet just as Yuri is walking away and tells him that he's still not satisfied with the fight. Yuri turns and says that if Junk Dog really wants a rematch, then he'll have to climb his way up and face him in a real Megalonia match. Later, Yukiko visits Yuri, asking if he went to check on those men and scolds him for stepping in the ring without her permission. The next day, while riding his motorcycle, Junk Dog spots a billboard that says, "Life is depressing if you got no peaches to clap." Seeing the message on the big billboard makes Junk Dog even more determined to enter Megalonia no matter what. But Nanbu reminds him that joining the tournament isn't that simple, he needs a citizenship ID in order to qualify. Even with that warning, Junk Dog begins ignoring Nanbu's instructions and goes all out in the ring, using his full strength to win a match that he was actually supposed to lose. This ends up causing serious trouble for Nanbu, especially with Fujimaki, the mob boss who controls the underground fighting ring. To avoid getting punished, Nanbu promises Fujimaki that he will pay him back using the prize money that Junk Dog will earn by winning Megalonia. Fujimaki agrees to the plan and even helps by making a fake citizenship ID for Junk Dog, who then picks the name Joe to use during the tournament. After that, Nanbu registers Junk Dog by the name Joe into the official Megalobox rankings, placing him all the way at the bottom 257th place. At the same time, it's revealed that Yuri will also be competing in the Megalonia tournament. The second fighter to enter is Pepe Iglesias, who is known as the second strongest Megaloboxer, and Yuri is set to face him at the beginning of the tournament. Later on, Nanbu meets up with Joe, who's now full of excitement about the chance to fight Yuri in the Megalonia tournament. But Nanbu reminds him that he has to actually make it into Megalonia first. Nanbu reveals his plan to have Joe face the strongest fighters the rankings will allow, so that he can quickly climb to the top. If everything goes right, Nanbu believes Joe can reach the top bracket in just 5 fights. Later, the two visits Gaskino factory to get better gear, and Nanbu tells Joe that the gear Yuri uses is a custom Shirato model which integrates directly into his body, so there is no delay in response time. Hearing that, Junk Dog suggests that they should also get something like that, but Nanbu freaks out, saying they are too broke to afford something like that. Meanwhile, a group of kids steal some cameras from a nearby shop and run off. At the same time, Joe and Nanbu happen to walk by and notice that the shopkeeper has a Shirato Group composite titanium prototype gear hidden in the back room. Just then, the same boys who stole the cameras earlier come into the shop carrying a bag full of stolen goods. They hand the cameras over to the shopkeeper in exchange for red candy, a dangerous kind of drug. One of the kids realizes there isn't enough red candy for him and loses his temper, attacking the shopkeeper. In response, the shopkeeper pulls out a knife and threatens the boy. Seeing things get out of hand, Joe tries to step in and help, but before he can do much, he's thrown out of the shop by Potemkin Higashi, a former Megaloboxer who had been showing off his old beat-up gear earlier. After that, Joe with his beat-up face leaves the shop with Nanbu. Nanbu then tells him that their next step is to challenge Shark Sanejima, the 185th ranked Megaloboxer, and the two begin their training right away. In the middle of their training session, one of the kids from earlier shows up. His name is Sachio, and he suddenly interrupts them, asking if they can take him with them to Megalonia. When they say no, Sachio sneaks into Gaskino and steals the prototype gear but ends up getting caught. After hearing what happened, Joe, Nanbu, and the other kids rush over to rescue him. Joe puts on the prototype gear to fight Higashi, but it quickly falls apart during the fight. Still, to everyone's surprise, Joe manages to defeat Higashi using just his own strength. Afterward, Joe and Nanbu decide to let Sachio join them on their journey to Megalonia. Afterward, Joe steps into the ring for his first pro match against Shark Sanejima but surprises the entire arena by showing up without any gear at all, leaving everyone in shock. It turns out this was all part of Nanbu's plan. He wanted Joe to fight Gearless on purpose. Sachio gets angry when he finds out, not understanding why they would take such a risk. Nanbu explains that since they're aiming to fight top-ranked opponents, they need to stand out. No one would care about some no-name boxer stuck at the bottom, but fighting without gear might just grab the attention they need. Nanbu also reveals that his goal is to sell the world on the idea of Gearless Joe, a fighter who doesn't need any gear to win. Back in the ring, the referee allows Joe to fight without gear since there's no rule against it, but this makes Shark Sanejima furious. Once the match starts, Joe quickly shows his skills by dodging all of Samejima's punches and landing strong jabs with just his bare fists. But things take a turn when Samejima lands a heavy blow, knocking Joe down in the first round. He looks completely shaken but manages to stand back upright at the 9th count, just as the round comes to an end. Joe slowly loses his consciousness while Nanbu tells him not to consider trading blows. As the next round begins, the audience shouts at Samejima to hit Joe, who keeps dodging his attacks the entire round. In the second round, Samejima loses his cool and ends up fouling Joe, who then spends the rest of the round carefully dodging his wild attacks. Watching from the side, Sachio notices something is off and yells at Nanbu, saying that Joe isn't looking right. During the break between rounds, Sachio scolds both Joe and Nanbu, snapping them out of it and helping them refocus on what really matters. With his head now clear, Joe steps back into the ring and uses his sharp footwork and timing to land a clean shot, knocking out Shark in the third round. Some time passes, and during that period, Joe wins 2 more matches in a row, quickly rising up the rankings all the way to 102. His fighting skills and unique Gearless style get noticed by more and more people. Before long, his style becomes popular online, even turning into a trend on Instagram and catching the attention of Yukiko as well. Meanwhile, Nanbu goes to meet an old contact to find out who Joe is going to fight next. The opponent is ranked 17th, but when Nanbu sees the name, he's completely shocked. It turns out to be someone from his past, a man with a half-burned face who instantly brings back painful and dark memories that Nanbu had tried to forget. Turns out, this 17th ranked opponent boxer is Nanbu's former student named Aragaki. Years ago, Aragaki served in the military but lost both his legs in an explosion. Since then, he's held a deep grudge against Nanbu for breaking the promise that the gym would always be his home. When they meet, Aragaki coldly tells Nanbu that he plans to destroy Joe as payback. Later, Nanbu tells Joe that he doesn't want him to fight Aragaki, but Joe stands his ground and says he's going to fight no matter what. Nanbu finally gives in and warns him that Aragaki knows every move and trick he ever taught. Eventually, Nanbu agrees to let Joe fight Aragaki and the two begin their intense training. While they prepare, Sachio starts digging into Aragaki's boxing history since he returned to Megalo 3 years ago. What he finds shocks him that Aragaki has a flawless record filled with brutal victories, with most of his opponents ending up in critical condition. Meanwhile, Nanbu visits another old-timer, who reveals more of Aragaki's story. It turns out that Nanbu believed Aragaki had died after a false report said he was killed in action. Later, Aragaki's current coach, the old geezer, advises him to cancel the match with Joe and choose a different opponent instead. But Aragaki refuses to back down as he's set on fighting Joe. He explains that beating the now well-known Gearless Joe will bring in more sponsors and boost his own name even further. While training, Aragaki recalls the time when he made it back and found the gym abandoned and later destroyed. The shock and pain nearly pushed him to take his own life. The next day, Sachio shares some info with Nanbu about Aragaki's gear, pointing out that it's made to be super light, so Aragaki might not actually have a big power advantage over Joe. As the fight draws near, Aragaki is still haunted by painful memories from his past. Meanwhile, Nanbu goes to meet Aragaki's current coach. There, he runs into Aragaki himself and takes the chance to apologize. Afterward, Nanbu drops to his knees like someone who got caught doing something wrong and begs Aragaki to stop the fight. He admits that he's truly sorry for leaving the gym years ago and for running away like a coward instead of facing everything back then. After that, the match begins, and Joe and Aragaki step into the ring to face each other. Right from the start, Joe holds his ground and fights back with full force, even though he's still gearless just like always. The two seem evenly matched for a while, trading blows, but then Aragaki starts landing a series of sharp jabs that begin to wear Joe down. In the middle of the first round, Aragaki delivers a perfectly timed hit that knocks Joe to the ground. As the referee starts the count, it creeps closer to 10 and things look bad to Joe. Joe manages to get back on his feet right at the 9th count just like he always does, since 9 feels like his lucky number. He jumps right back into the fight with Aragaki, but things only get tougher from there. Aragaki keeps landing with clean shots, and Joe starts to struggle under pressure. Watching from the sidelines, Sachio turns to Nanbu and asks if he knows any weaknesses in Aragaki's style. But even Nanbu admits that Aragaki's megalo boxing has reached a whole new level. Then, in the ring, Aragaki grabs Joe in a tight hold, only to toss him aside like a soaked towel after beating him up, which causes the crowd to laugh at Joe's helpless state. After the round ends, Nanbu, thinking the fight is already lost, nearly throws in the towel to stop it. But Joe quickly stops him, refusing to give up. He starts fighting back by adjusting his stance and evenly spreading his weight, just like Nanbu had taught him before. Even though Joe gets knocked down again, this time he jumps back up in less than 5 seconds. Watching from the side, Sachio realizes something and tells Nanbu that Joe isn't just trying to win as he wants to win using the lessons Nanbu gave him. Recognizing the technique, Aragaki recalls memories from his time under Nanbu, and starts to break down as his anger overwhelms him and both of them stand still hitting jabs after jabs without breaking down, but then Joe lands a solid punch that nearly knocks Aragaki out. This shocks everyone and the entire ground breaks into silence. The fight goes on into the 4th round, with both Joe and Aragaki taking heavy hits and pushing each other to the limit. But before the 5th round can begin, Aragaki suddenly forfeits the match, making Joe the winner of the 4th round by default. After the match, Aragaki apologizes to his current coach for not finishing the fight. However, the coach simply tells him that he had already planned to stop the fight soon, having seen how much Aragaki was struggling inside. After the match, Nanbu meets Aragaki in the locker room, and the two finally make peace with each other. Aragaki shares that the damage his leg implants took during the fight was too much, and there's a chance he could end up bedridden as this was his final megalo boxing match. He then pulls out an old failed betting slip, the same one Nanbu once gave him as a good luck charm. Aragaki reveals that this small slip was what stopped him from taking his own life during his darkest time. He hands it back to Nanbu and tells him to give it to Joe instead. Yukiko makes a public announcement, revealing Glenn Burrows as the third entry in the Megalonia tournament. Meanwhile, Mikio Shirato talks to Yuri and points out that the public seems more interested in Gearless Joe than any of the other fighters. He then hints that he has a plan in place to make sure Joe doesn't make it to Megalonia at all. Joe continues to grow in popularity as people start sharing his posters everywhere in the city and couldn't stop talking about this Gearless Joe defeating all the guys with machines. Later on, a news reporter announced that the Shirato group's Maverick, Mikio, has just won a match against Sugar R. At the same time, Nanbu and Sachio are watching the news on TV when Yukiko from the Shirato group happens to walk by. Nanbu stops her and asks if this match was just a setup to clear the way for her brother, Mikio. He points out that the public won't accept something so staged and that everyone's attention is already shifting toward Gearless Joe. Yukiko firmly tells Nanbu that anyone can compete in Megalonia except those who don't use gear. After that, they all head out to watch Mikio's match against Sugar R, and even by the second round, it's clear Mikio has the upper hand. He easily wins the fight, showing off both his skills and his advanced gear without much effort. After the match, Mikio steps up in front of the crowd and announces that he plans to challenge Joe next to see who truly deserves the final spot in Megalonia. Meanwhile, Nanbu and Sachio rush back to Joe and tell him that while it's great they've made it this far, his fake ID won't hold up much longer. Then, as Joe takes off his shirt, both Nanbu and Sachio are stunned by the sight of his bruised and battered body. His injuries are so bad that they look like a giant target just waiting to be hit by his next opponent. Meanwhile, the Shirato group's executive committee asks Yukiko if she is serious about having a match between that Gearless Joe and Mikio, but it turns out she does. They then pressure Yukiko to place Mikio in Megalonia, but she clearly has her own plans and isn't interested in helping her brother advance any further. Meanwhile, Nanbu meets up with a mysterious middleman who informs him that Shirato's president doesn't want Mikio getting into Megalonia. At the same time, Mikio is getting his regular body checkup and doing some practice when Yukiko shows up. Mikio doesn't hold back as he confronts Yukiko and tells her he knows she set up his fight with Sugar, hoping he'd lose and get kicked out of the tournament. He also accuses her of planning a match between him and Joe for the same reason, to take him down for good. Before their fight starts, Mikio meets Joe and reveals that he knows Joe is an illegal underground fighter using a fake ID. He warns Joe that if he steps into the ring, he'll expose him to everyone. Joe tries to punch Mikio, but Nanbu steps in and knocks Joe out to stop him. Because Joe doesn't show up for the match, Mikio wins by default. Afterward, Mikio vows to take control of the Shirato group away from Yukiko. As a result of the match, the Megalonia Dome is set to hold a ceremony the next night to officially announce Mikio as the final entry in the tournament. Meanwhile, Fujimaki expresses his disappointment to Nanbu, saying they were just one step away from making it into Megalonia. Later, Sachio and Nanbu tell Joe that even though they lost, the people from Shirato were never planning to let them in anyway. Joe gets furious at Nanbu, but Nanbu explains that it's because Joe tried to punch Mikio, someone who already knew about his fake ID. Nanbu adds that if Mikio really wanted to get rid of them, he could have exposed Joe publicly, but he didn't. That means Mikio must have a personal reason for wanting Joe out, one he hasn't told anyone. Thinking back, Nanbu reveals that when he noticed Mikio hadn't leaked Joe's secret, he went to beg Fujimaki for any dirt on Mikio that could force a rematch. Fujimaki then told him that someone did ask about Joe's fake ID but never got the full story from his men. That's when Nanbu realized Mikio was bluffing the whole time, using half-truths to manipulate them. Fujimaki then told them that he will provide the info they need, but this will be their last chance. Fujimaki then says that he got perfect lead whose name is Mizuhara Koichi, a freelance engineer who did gear development for Shirato until 2 years. To get leverage on Mikio, Nanbu interrogates a former gear engineer, who looks more like a fake course seller than an engineer. Back in the present, Joe asks what the engineer told them, and Sachio explains that Mikio once led a team that developed a gear capable of reading and analyzing the movements of other fighters' gear in real time. This was part of a race to outperform another internal team, the one responsible for developing the revolutionary integrated gear that Yuri now wears. Mikio's gear was ultimately seen as inferior, and his team was sidelined, which may explain his personal grudge and why he's so determined to take down Joe and reclaim his position. Nanbu now thinks Joe might actually have a chance, so he tries everything he can to get Yukiko to agree to a rematch. He begs her and tries to explain, but Yukiko doesn't trust him and thinks he's up to something. Because of that, she locks him in a room so he can't do anything else. That night, during the big ceremony where the final 4 Megalonia fighters are introduced, Joe suddenly shows up on his bike and crashes the event. He stands in front of everyone and demands that Mikio fight him again, but this time in a fair match. After seeing how serious Joe is, Yukiko makes a big choice. She takes the last Megalonia ticket and rips it in half, giving one piece to Joe and the other to Mikio. She says whoever wins the rematch will get the last spot in the tournament. Mikio is beating up Joe in their official rematch because his gear, Ace, is now way better than before. It learns Joe's moves really fast and fights back within seconds. At the beginning, Mikio takes control and pushes Joe into defense, not letting him fight properly. Whenever Joe finds a small chance to hit him, Mikio just dodges and hits him right back. Joe almost gets knocked out, but Nambu thinks that Mikio might be reading Joe even without using the gear. It turns out Mikio's gear is even more amazing and smarter than it was the last time. But Joe changes his way of fighting and lands some good punches on Mikio. Still, Mikio's machine, Ace, learns super fast, so it copies Joe's new pattern and hits him right back. When Joe ends up losing the round, Yukiko gets bored and decides to walk out, but Yuri stops her from leaving. Yuri says that Mikio made his gear stronger just so he could fight him one day. With this new version, the pressure on Mikio is a lot more, and a flashback shows that Mikio even takes drugs to boost his link with Ace, making it way stronger than normal. Back to the fight, the third round begins and nothing changes so far. Joe once again gets his cheeks hooped by Mikio. When people see Joe struggling so badly against Mikio, the whole crowd starts laughing like he's just a clown dancing in the ring. Mikio hits Joe so hard that he goes flying out of the ring, and Sachio tries to run and help him, but Nanbu stops him, saying they'll get disqualified if they step in. Nanbu then tells Joe to use his strongest punch and knock Mikio out, because in the end, it's not the gear that chooses the winner. The match starts again, and Mikio suddenly remembers an old argument he once had with Yuri about boxing. In that memory, Yuri tells him that he doesn't think much of Mikio and that he only cares about himself. The two of them argue for a while and almost get into a fight, but in the end, they stop before they get physical. That moment from the past makes Mikio even angrier, and with that rage building up inside him, he goes back to the match and starts beating up Joe even harder. In the end, he manages to land a strong punch on Joe in real time. Since none of Joe's moves are working, he makes a bold choice and drops his guard on purpose. This confuses Ace's system, and Mikio doesn't know how to finish Joe off. More flashbacks show Mikio wondering if his boxing skills are really his own or if they just belong to Ace. Joe then decides to risk it all with one big counterpunch. Nambu thinks Mikio will throw a right punch straight at him, but instead, Mikio surprises them by using his left hand to attack. But Joe reacts without thinking and lands a strong uppercut that knocks Mikio out, winning him a place in Megalonia. While Team Nowhere celebrates happily on their boat after the match, Nambu quietly slips away from the party to go meet with Fujimaki. Afterward, Fujimaki tells Nambu to be honest with Joe and tell him everything. Right then, Joe comes outside to pee, and Nambu decides to talk. He tells Joe that the real fight isn't even going to happen, and the truth is that he made a deal with Fujimaki. The real bet was for Joe to reach Megalonia but lose the match on purpose once he gets to the semi-finals. Nambu also explains that Fujimaki is in charge of all the betting for Megalonia and there's no way they can escape from his control. Joe gets angry and asks Nambu if he ever really believed in him. Nambu says that isn't true. Each time Joe won, Nambu saw more of his potential, but now it's too late and throwing the match was the only way he could get that fake ID. Joe realizes Nambu still wants him to lose the fight just to save himself. He punches Nambu and then races away on his bike. Sachio hears their shouting, feels betrayed by Nambu and runs off too. Fujimaki warns Nambu that if Joe doesn't lose the fight on purpose, he'll kill all three of them. At the same time, a press conference is being held to talk about the upcoming match between Burroughs and Joe, but Joe doesn't show up. Yukiko's assistant tells her that there's still no news from Team Nowhere about why Joe didn't come to the event. Later on, Nambu finds Sachio and tells him that they have to leave right away, or else Fujimaki is going to kill him and turn him into soup. But Sachio refuses to go with him. Nambu then grabs Sachio's hat and sees that underneath it, there's a photo of his father. He looks at the picture and asks Sachio if he's just using Joe to get revenge for what happened to his dad. It turns out Nambu knows the truth now. Sachio's father was the one who made the first design of the gear that Yuri wears, but someone in the Shirato group stole his work, and later, his dad was found dead. Afterward, Nambu takes Sachio to Yukiko's mansion and tells her to let him get his revenge if that's what he wants, but Sachio just stands there and can't go through with it. Seeing this, Nambu changes his plan and instead convinces Yukiko to take care of Sachio and keep him safe from Fujimaki. That same night, Yukiko begins digging into the truth about what happened to Sachio's father. Her assistant comes in and tells her that there's no doubt as Sachio's father really was the original developer of the gear. At the same time, Yuri and Pepe Iglesias face off in their match, and now Yuri is wearing his famous integrated gear, which is the newest and most advanced model that the Shirato company has ever made. However, Yuri wins his match against Pepe Iglesias and makes it to the final round of Megalonia. Outside the arena, Joe and Yuri have a quiet talk about why they're fighting and what's driving them. Meanwhile, Nanbu, drunk and wandering around the boat, remembers the story Fujimaki told him about the scorpion and the frog. Fujimaki's men take Nanbu to the arena where Joe is set to fight Glenn Burrows in the semi-final match. At the same time, Sachio becomes a full-time helper around Yukiko's house and starts cleaning to repay her for letting him stay there. One day, Yukiko sees him carefully wrapping a bandage around Joe's ID card and asks if he's planning to go watch the fight. But Sachio shakes his head and says no, as he's not going. Deep down, he feels hurt and thinks that both Joe and Nanbu have turned their backs on him by agreeing to take part in a fixed fight. Meanwhile, Nanbu is taken to the fancy luxury suite where Fujimaki is watching the fight, and there, Fujimaki's men tell him that all of their clients have placed bets on Joe, so now he has to win no matter what. A little later, Glenn Burrows makes his entrance into the ring, showing off with a flashy and luxurious style that grabs everyone's attention. But when Joe shows up, he comes alone and quietly steps into the ring, wearing his old gear again after recently visiting his trusted mechanic friend to get it fixed up. This surprises everyone watching because Joe became famous for fighting without any gear, but now he's suddenly wearing one himself. As Joe stands in the ring, Nanbu calls him and says that he's not asking to be forgiven, since he knows he doesn't deserve it, but he still wants to be there to support him. Then, with a heavy heart, Nanbu tells Joe that he has to take a dive in the third round. On the other hand, Sachio somehow makes it to the stadium along with his group of broke but loyal friends. At the same time, the match kicks off, and Nanbu starts giving Joe advice on how to fight from the corner. As the fight goes on, Joe performs well and keeps up the pressure, while Burrows, despite his strong moves, starts to look a little nervous. Just like that, the first round comes to an end. While Fujimaki watches closely from behind, he mocks Nanbu for acting like a real coach, even though he knows Nanbu is planning to make Joe throw the fight. Nanbu replies that if Joe wasn't holding back, it would already be over, as he even held back on that uppercut just now. Then the second round starts, and Burrows comes in strong, hitting Joe over and over like he's a punching bag. Joe doesn't follow any of Nanbu's instructions, but even after taking all those hits, he somehow stays on his feet. Nanbu hopes that by doing this, their debt will finally be paid, but Fujimaki tells him coldly that Joe will always be under his control, no matter what. In the ring, Joe is getting pounded in the corner, and Nanbu, desperate, shouts at him to keep fighting. Joe's gear starts breaking apart and falls off, and he crashes onto the mat. Just then, Sachio shows up at the ringside and yells at Joe not to give up. Hearing his voice, Joe pushes himself up from the mat and with perfect timing, lands a powerful counterpunch that knocks Burrows out cold. Meanwhile, back in the suite, Nanbu starts fighting Fujimaki's men, refusing to back down. One of them pulls a gun on him, but Nanbu grabs a knife in return. At the same time, Joe and Sachio are busy celebrating their win in the ring, but as soon as they realize what's happening, they rush to the suite. When they arrive, they find that Nanbu has stabbed out his remaining eye as a way to pay his debt to Fujimaki. Shocked and impressed by what Nanbu did, Fujimaki decides to let all three of them go free. Meanwhile, Yukiko signs a big contract with the military for her company's integrated gear project. She tells Yuri that Shirato's technology can now be a symbol of hope for the future, and with this deal, he'll finally be able to prove that to the world. But Yuri surprises her by saying that he's planning to have his gear removed before the final match because he wants to fight Joe as equals. Yukiko is completely shocked when she realizes that Yuri has made up his mind to go through with removing his own gear. She tells Yuri that she won't allow him to do this and even warns that she'll cancel the finals if he goes through with it. But Yuri asks her not to do that, reminding her that Joe risked his life just to reach this fight. Meanwhile, Joe trains non-stop from morning, full of energy and excitement about finally facing Yuri. Just then, Nanbu, now completely blind, arrives with a few kids and finds Sachio. He tells him that if no one steps in, Joe will keep punching a worn-out bag until there's nothing left. That's why Nanbu called in Aragaki to train Joe in his place. Using his sharp hearing, Aragaki starts giving Joe tips and correcting his form during training. Meanwhile, Yuri visits Mikio at his quiet cabin in the woods to get his gear surgically removed. Mikio agrees to do the surgery but warns Yuri that there's no guarantee it can be taken out safely, since the gear is fully integrated into his body. Later on, Yukiko gets a call from Mikio and heads to the cabin. When she arrives, Mikio shows her Yuri's condition and assures her that his life isn't in any danger. He also says that she wanted Megalonia to demonstrate the performance of the integrated gear and get the contract she wanted. So, he tells her that she should just let Yuri do what he wants now. Later on, Yukiko finds out that Joe's ID badge is fake and that, before the last 3 months, he was fighting in an illegal ring located in the restricted zones. Her assistant tells her that she now has a clear reason to kick Joe out of the tournament, but Yukiko holds back and doesn't act right away. Instead, she decides to go see Yuri. When she arrives, Mikio asks if she comes to ask him why he didn't stop Joe from entering in the first place. Afterward, Yuri slowly begins to recover from the pain following his surgery. When Yukiko offers him anesthesia to ease it, he gently refuses, saying he wants to face the pain on his own. Later, Yukiko visits Joe at the riverbank. She tells him that she knows about the fake ID he used, but she won't do anything to stop his upcoming fight with Yuri. She also admits that she still doesn't fully understand what pushed Yuri to go to such great lengths just for the chance to fight Joe again. Before the match begins, Nanbu starts goofing around and dances like a clown to lighten the mood. Then, he hands Joe a losing ticket from a dog race he once bet on, joking that it's a lucky charm that will help Yuri miss his punches. After that, Joe steps into the ring with no gear on, just like he always does. The rematch between Joe and Yuri begins in the finals of Megalonia. Yuri also enters the ring without his gear, choosing to fight Joe on equal ground. When Sachio sees the scars on Yuri's body where the gear used to be, he tells Nanbu it looks like huge claws had ripped into him. Meanwhile, Yukiko struggles to deal with her military clients, who now want to customize her gear for weapon development, an idea she clearly doesn't like and feels uncomfortable about. Back in the ring, even though Yuri's recovery from surgery has left him with low stamina, he still keeps up with Joe, matching him hit for hit. Joe is throwing more punches but Yuri is landing more of them. It becomes clear that Yuri is reading all of Joe's moves ahead of time and is able to hit back even faster, keeping the fight intense and close. As the rounds pass, both fighters keep going head-to-head, trading punches without holding back. Yuri starts to take the lead and at one point, he nearly knocks Joe out. The fight keeps getting tougher, but neither of them backs down. Then, in the 13th round, both Joe and Yuri put everything they have into one final punch. Just as they clash, the scene suddenly jumps 1 year later. Nanbu has now opened a brand new boxing gym called Gym Nowhere. The next Megalonia tournament is about to begin, and the title is up for grabs since the original winner has stepped down. Yuri is shown sitting in a wheelchair, no longer able to fight like he once did. Later, Joe arrives at the gym on his bike to drop off a few packages, looking calm and at peace. In the end, it's revealed that Gearless Joe had won the championship fight a year ago by knockout, closing the chapter on their legendary battle. Ever since he won the title belt at Megalonia, Joe has been moving from one underground fight to another, wearing simple megalo boxing gear and using the name Nomad. With his messy beard, he now looks more like an old uncle with a bunch of kids than a champion. In one of the matches, Joe fights a guy named Korea and beats him up badly like he's just a punching bag. The announcer then tells the crowd that, no matter how much they dislike him, they have to accept Joe's victory. After the fight, Joe meets an old man who tells him that while people in the big city might enjoy the way he fights, folks around here don't care for it, they just come to watch a good show. Joe keeps drifting from city to city, staying in random hotels and living like a tired, broken man, almost like a drunk. One day, Nanbu's ghost shows up and joins him. He tells Joe that God doesn't give anyone more than they can handle, and changing his name from Joe to Joe won't erase what happened before. He says Joe can't keep running away from his past. Right after that, Joe sees a news report about the new Megalonia champion, Edison Liu. Already dealing with so much and still hooked on painkillers, he walks to a nearby store to grab more pills. Later, he goes to a nearby bar and tries to take too many pills at once, hoping to numb everything. But a mysterious man shows up and tells him not to take them. Joe doesn't say much, gets up, and leaves the bar right away. He jumps on his bike and goes for a ride, trying to let out all the anger and pain he's been holding inside. The next day, Joe is seen sleeping at a small restaurant, looking tired and worn out. While he's there, he overhears some people talking about a former pro megalo boxer named Chief, who's been crushing it in the underground scene and scaring off other fighters. After hearing that, Joe speaks up and says he wants to be Chief's next opponent. Some people there recognize him and say he's the same guy who keeps jumping from one ring to another every time he gets kicked out. Even so, the old man in charge agrees to let Joe go and look for Chief. The next day, Joe's match against Chief finally begins. As the fight starts, Joe realizes that he's seen Chief before. He's the same guy who stopped him from taking pills at the bar the other night. At the same time, Chief seems to already know that Joe is actually Joe. While trading punches, Joe notices something strange. When he lands a weak punch, Chief suddenly goes down and Joe wins by knockout. That's when he figures out that Chief must have been paid by the promoters to throw the fight on purpose. After the match, in the parking lot, Joe angrily calls Chief a cheater for throwing the fight. This makes Chief mad, and he punches Joe hard in the stomach, mocking him for depending on painkillers instead of facing things head-on. Hurt and frustrated, Joe rides off on his bike into the wilderness. While out there, he finds a dead wolf lying alone and decides to bury it with his own hands. Later that night, Joe starts seeing the ghost of Nanbu, who returns to haunt him, bringing back memories and guilt he's been trying to avoid. Later on, Joe walks into a bar again and spots a poster for the Grand Megalobox tournament hanging on the wall. The bar receptionist notices him looking at it and suggests that he should try entering, saying the prize money is huge and with a win, he might never have to step into the ring again. But instead of aiming for the big stage, Joe signs up for another small, basic fight. While he's inside, an immigrant boy sneaks up outside, hotwires his motorbike, and rides off, stealing it. However, an old beggar sitting by the side of the street tells Joe that there's a group of immigrants living just outside the city, so if he's lucky, he might find his bike there. Joe follows the lead and trails the boy back to a rundown community set up inside an abandoned amusement park. There, Joe learns that the boy's name is Mio, so he grabs him and takes him straight to his mother, telling her that her son stole his bike and he's come to get it back. Marla, shocked and angry, slaps Mio and then shows Joe what's left of the bike. It's already taken apart and turned into scraps. It turns out that Mio had given both the motorbike and Joe's megalo boxing gear to his mother, Marla, who planned to break them down for parts. As she sees the condition Joe is in, she offers to help him fix the bike. But before he can respond, Joe suddenly collapses. Later, Joe wakes up inside a trailer while the community is busy getting ready for an upcoming festival. Marla tells him he can stay in the trailer for now since fixing his bike is going to take some time. Suddenly, a construction crew shows up and demands that the immigrant families pack up and leave, saying the land is about to be sold at an auction. But before things get worse, the chief steps in and stands at the front, convincing the crew to delay the demolition until the auction is officially completed. That night, while talking to Joe, the chief quietly admits that he's not actually a real ranked megalo boxer and he only pretended to be one so he could earn some cash by throwing fights. In the past, Chief was inspired by the story of Gearless Joe, an undocumented fighter just like him, which pushed him to come to this country and chase the dream of a better life. While Chief is talking about this, Mio happens to overhear him call Joe by his real name, Joe. Curious and unsure, Mio ends up telling a mob lieutenant named Tetsu about Joe's identity. The next day, Joe speeds off on his repaired bike just as mob boss Hikawa shows up, looking for him, only to find that Joe is already gone. Meanwhile, the chief confidently tells the community about his plan to win the upcoming Megalobox tournament and use the prize money to buy back the land, so their people won't be forced to leave. Meanwhile, Joe remembers his final moments with Nanbu and can't stop blaming himself for his death. Overwhelmed with guilt, he opens another bottle of painkillers right before a fight. But the next night, something changes and Joe comes back to the chief and tells him he wants to train together. He also says that he's done with the drugs and has stopped taking them, ready to move forward and fight clean. Afterward, the chief explains that the tournament will have a total of 3 matches and then asks Joe how he plans to fight them. Joe thinks for a moment and says that his main goal will be to avoid taking too much damage. He explains that even if he makes it to the finals, it won't mean anything if he's already beat up and can't fight properly. So, he plans to focus on defense, letting his opponents come to him while he waits for the right moment to strike back. Just then, Joe and Chief begin training together, slowly getting in sync as teammates. During one of their sessions, Joe suddenly sees the ghost of Nanbu, who smiles and asks him if it feels like they're fighting side by side again, just like in the old days. But the moment quickly turns dark as Joe collapses from the pain and exhaustion caused by his withdrawal from the painkillers. As he lies on the ground, memories rush back as Nanbu's death and the heartbreaking moment when Sachio told him he would never forgive him. Meanwhile, Tetsu and his gang begin a harassment campaign against the immigrants living in the casa, trying to pressure them into leaving before the auction takes place. Mio, still feeling unsure and frustrated, quietly helps them, thinking it might make things easier in the end. Chief gathers the community and tells them they need to stay calm and put up with it just a little longer until he wins the tournament and saves their home. But the people start to get angry, blaming Chief for all the trouble, saying none of this would be happening if he hadn't gone against Hikawa in the first place. Afterward, Marla shows up and tells everyone to clean up the amusement park to prepare for the festival, trying to lift everyone's spirits. But Chief pulls her aside and tells her the truth that Joe's body is in bad shape because of all the painkillers he's been taking. Later that night, Joe finally wakes up and looks at Chief with guilt in his eyes. He apologizes for messing everything up right before the match and begins blaming himself, saying he ruined his homeland, his friends, and everyone who ever cared about him. Chief then tells Joe that he also lost his homeland, but this place, the community they've built, is where he and his son can finally feel at home again. The next day, the opening day of the Grand Megalobox tournament finally arrives. Joe is still battling his inner demons, but he stays focused, and his counterpunching strategy helps Chief win his first match with a strong first-round knockout. Back at the casa, while the others cheer the victory, Marla sits down with Joe and shares more about Chief's past. She tells him that Chief once had a wife who passed away early, and a sick but brilliant son named Carlo, who helped design Chief's gear. Carlo made sure the gear was built for defense, to protect the Chief rather than just help him win. When Carlo died during their journey to this country, Chief fell into a deep hole. He started abusing painkillers and drinking heavily, drowning in grief. One day, after a match, his gear broke down, and Chief finally broke down too, crying for the first time in a long while. From that moment, he made a promise to himself to get clean and honor Carlo's memory by living a better life. Later on, while Chief and the community work together to fix a sabotaged water pump, Joe quietly makes peace with his memories of Nanbu. Feeling a weight lifted, Joe cuts his hair short, getting ready for the next round of the tournament. In that match, Chief uses his acting skills and experience in the ring to trick his opponent, landing a clean KO. But that night, things take a dark turn. Tetsu's teenage thugs sneak up and throw a Molotov cocktail into the casa, and Chief's trailer bursts into flames. Without thinking twice, Chief rushes into the trailer just as the fire suddenly grows out of control. Half the trailer is completely destroyed. Chief manages to escape with only minor burns and also saves his box full of prize money meant for the casa. He smiles weakly and says he believes his family must have prayed for him to stay alive just a little longer. The next day, Mio steps forward and takes the blame for the fire. He decides to leave the casa on his own, feeling the weight of what he's done. His mother, heartbroken, realizes he was the one who told the thugs about Joe in the first place. She looks at him and quietly asks if he's even ashamed of himself. But Mio, filled with anger and confusion, shouts back at her, blaming her for everything and saying that she was the one who brought him into this messed up country in the first place. As Mio walks out of the casa, he finds Joe and Chief waiting for him outside. Chief looks him in the eye and tells him not to speak about dying so lightly, because life is still worth something. But Mio, still hurting inside, snaps back and says it's Chief's fault that his son died. His words hit hard, and both his mother and Joe became furious at him for saying something so cruel. The next day, the Chief visits Carlo's grave with Joe by his side. Joe quietly kneels and speaks to the grave as well, paying his respect. He then turns to the Chief and asks if he always visits the grave before every match. Chief nods and says yes, it's a good luck charm from his homeland, a way to carry his son's spirit into the ring with him. As the finals of the tournament begin, the land developer casually tells Hikawa that he doesn't care who wins, as long as he gets paid for the lot. In the ring, Hikawa's megalo boxer, Mamiya, starts using dirty tricks, racist taunts and illegal punches to throw Chief off his game and push him into making mistakes. Joe watches from the corner, shouting and trying to snap Chief out of it. Both fighters get more and more worn down as the match goes on, trading blows and pushing their limits. Just when it looks like Chief might not make it, Mio suddenly shows up at ringside and starts cheering for him with everything he's got. Hearing Mio's voice gives Chief a final burst of strength, and with one solid punch in the 5th round, he knocks Mamiya out cold. With the prize money from the tournament and Chief's earlier savings, the community finally has enough to buy their land and secure their home. After the match, the Chief tells Joe he should return to real megalo boxing and chase his true path again. He smiles and says he hopes they'll have a proper match one day, fighter to fighter. But the next morning, the tragedy strikes. Chief is found dead in his truck. The community gathers to hold a heartfelt funeral in his honor. As the ceremony goes on, Marla finalizes the purchase of the land, making Chief's dream a reality. Neo approaches Joe and tells him that they've all agreed to pass down Chief's gear to him in his memory. Joe thanks Marla and Mio with deep respect, then gets on his bike and rides away from the casa, ready to stop running from his past and face whatever comes next. Afterward, Joe returns to Gym Nowhere, only to find it abandoned and falling apart, a broken shell of what it once was. Flashbacks show happier times, when Nanbu, Joe, Aragaki, and the others were all together, laughing and training like a real family. Back in the present, Joe goes to the same old mechanic shop and asks what happened to everything. The shop owner looks at him and says it's too late to worry about all that now. Joe turns to walk away, but the old man stops him and adds that a powerful typhoon hit the area and flooded the river, washing everything away. Just then, one of the kids from the old days shows up. Turns out the old man took them in as apprentices after everything fell apart. Joe recognizes the girl, whose name is Oicho, and asks her about the others. Oicho smiles and simply says they're doing good, then hops on her car and drives away. After that, Joe walks back to the wrecked remains of Gym Nowhere. As he stands there quietly, everything from the past starts to come back to times when they laughed together, trained hard, and felt like a real family who cared for each other. However, Nanbu is dealing with cancer in its final stage, and the doctors say he has only about 6 months left to live. He could live longer if he paid for a very expensive surgery, but instead of doing that, he chooses to spend the rest of his time with his family because that's what matters most to him now. At the same time, Edison Liu, who is Yuri's student, asks to have a match with Joe, but Joe is mostly busy taking care of the orphanage and working as a trainer at the gym. Joe agrees to the fight because he wants to win the prize money and use it to help pay for a new experimental treatment that might help Nanbu. He spends many weeks getting ready and training hard, but Sachio doesn't see it the same way and feels like Joe is ignoring Nanbu, even though his health keeps getting worse every day. Right now, Joe ends up falling asleep inside the broken-down gym, but when he wakes up, he's shocked to see an older Sachio suddenly attacking him without warning. Once Joe sees his face and realizes it's really him, he doesn't fight back and just lets Sachio keep hitting him until he finally passes out. Later on, Joe learns from Aragaki that more than a year ago, a typhoon hit the area badly. During that time, Sachio was able to save the kids, but even after that, the gym was never fixed or brought back to how it was before. Everyone either ends up going to an orphanage or finds other jobs to survive. After some time, Sachio asks Aragaki to train him in fighting, but even though he doesn't have the same natural skill that Joe once had, Aragaki still agrees to teach him anyway. Later on, Sachio joins an underground fighting ring, hoping to prove himself, but he gets beaten up badly during the match. As he walks out of the arena, he sees Joe there but chooses not to say anything and just leaves without speaking to him. While Joe is getting some water from a river close by, he suddenly notices Yuri riding past and dropping a flyer for his Chinese restaurant as he quickly speeds away. Yuri doesn't say a word and clearly tries to avoid Joe, pretending not to see him at all. But when Joe notices that Yuri's bike isn't running properly and seems to be struggling, he walks over and decides to give him a hand by pushing the bike for a while to help him move along. At the restaurant, Sachio sits with Oicho and their other friend, and they start talking about Joe. The other boy brings up an idea, saying they should do an interview on Joe with a big headline like, "After 5 years, the legendary champion Gearless Joe returns after losing to Liu and disappearing." He thinks they could make a lot of money from that kind of story. But Oicho turns to him and reminds him, calling him Santa, that Joe left them all behind and disappeared without a word. Still, Santa doesn't really care about that and just focuses on the idea of making a profit. Just then, a few local gangsters walk in and begin bothering Oicho, asking her to bring them some beer and a plate of gyoza. Santa tells them that the owner isn't here right now because he's out making a delivery, so they'll have to settle for other drinks instead. But the men ignore him and keep messing with Oicho, calling her a little princess and making fun of her with rude jokes about flat dolls. Things get worse until Sachio suddenly stands up and smashes a bottle right over one of the guys' heads, stopping them cold. The gangsters later return and completely trash the restaurant, destroying things inside before running off with the deed to the building. Afterward, Fujimaki shows up and gives Sachio a chance to win the deed back, but only if he can beat a much stronger opponent in a fight. Just moments before the match is about to start, one of Sachio's friends asks him what's going on and why he isn't getting into the ring to fight. Before Sachio can answer, the announcer suddenly speaks up and tells the crowd that there's been a last-minute change in tonight's matchup. At that moment, Joe steps forward without hesitation and chooses to fight in Sachio's place, entering the ring once more as the legendary Gearless Joe. Later on, Joe remembers the day he fought Edison Liu and how just minutes before the match began, Nanbu's health suddenly got worse, and how Joe ended up getting knocked down hard in the second round. Back in the present, during the new fight, Gearless Joe also gets knocked out in the second round. While the kids wait for him to return, Joe finally shows up and tells them that he lost the match, but he was still able to get the deed back because of the deal he made with Fujimaki. After hearing this, Sachio looks at Joe and tells him to leave. Edison Liu trains hard every day as he prepares for his upcoming fight against Mac Rosario, and everyone around him believes that he's doing really well. Even after beating Gearless Joe 5 years ago, he went on to win the second Megalonia, proving his strength. Still, there are some people who continue to think he's not as strong as Yuri. Just then, Santa walks into the gym and tells Edison Liu that Gearless Joe has returned to town. After that, Edison Liu goes to Yuri and begs him to let him have another match with Joe, but Yuri says no, reminding him that he already beat Joe once before. Feeling upset and disappointed, Edison Liu walks out of the gym. Yuri then turns to the other coach and says that this is the first time Liu has ever asked him for anything. The other coach explains that Lou wants to fight Joe again because he's trying to push himself as far as he possibly can. Later that night, after finding out that Joe is really back in town, Lou decides to go and meet him face to face. When he arrives, he sees that Joe is busy working hard, trying to rebuild the whole gym by himself. Joe, still focused on the work, asks Edison what he wants since he's already tied up with something important. Edison replies that he's not here to fight but instead, he has a job offer and wants Joe to become his sparring partner. Edison feels that even though he defeated Joe 5 years ago, most fans and the media still look at him as just Yuri's student, instead of seeing him as a real pro megalo boxer on his own. He believes that's because he never got the chance to fight Joe when he was at his best. At the same time, Mac appears in a media interview where they talk about his past as a short-tempered megalo boxer who later changed his path and chose to become a police officer. Mac ends up getting paralyzed after risking his life to save innocent people during a gang fight. Later on, a young CEO named Ryugo Sakuma steps in and gets special permission to test a new technology called the Brain Encoding System, which was created by his company, Roscoe. Thanks to the system, Mac gets a second chance at life and returns to the world of megalo boxing, while Ryugo uses the opportunity to show off the success of his company's product to the rest of the world. The next day, Joe arrives at Jimmy's gym to train with Edison and the two begin sparring together and shows off some moves to each other, but their practice is quickly interrupted when they catch Santa secretly recording their fight to use in his next article. Edison gets serious and promises that after he finishes his match with Mac, he'll face Joe for real. Finally, the day of the big match arrives. Joe shows up with the kids, and they all take their seats near the ring, though Sachio and Oicho are nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Yukiko runs into her brother Mikio at the venue. As Mac walks toward the ring, he briefly locks eyes with Joe, staring straight in his direction. The match between Lou and Mac begins, and Mac can't seem to stop staring at Joe, also known as Gearless Joe, who's sitting on the ringside. Santa turns to Joe and asks if he knows who Mac is, but Joe replies that he has no idea and says he's never met the guy before in his life. Soon after, the referee steps onto the stage and proudly announces Lou's entrance. Lou walks out with a powerful entrance, joined by Yuri, who now needs support since he can no longer walk on his own. As the first round begins, Mac comes in fast, throwing a flurry of quick punches, but Lou stays focused and keeps his guard up, doing his best to block every strike Mac throws at him. Mac hits Lou so hard during the round that Lou nearly collapses to the floor, and the referee starts the countdown. But Lou manages to push himself up and stand again by the count of 6. After that, the first round comes to an end, with Mac clearly in control and showing off his overwhelming strength throughout the match. Later, it's revealed that Lou is actually using fewer gear parts in his setup, which helps increase his range of motion, giving him more flexibility and allowing him to use a wider variety of attacks during the fight. As the second round starts, Joe turns to Santa and the other person sits nearby and tells them that Lou is going to win this match. At first, Lou starts off careful and cautious, but it doesn't take long before he starts reading Mac's movements and gains the upper hand in the fight. Mac starts struggling to land any clean hits now, while Lou keeps pressuring him and lands several strong punches. One of Lou's strikes slices Mac's forehead open, making things even harder for him. Right after that, Lou lands a perfect hit on Mac's left side, sending him crashing down to the ground. But even after taking such a hard blow, Mac pushes through the pain and manages to get back on his feet just as the referee counts to 6. Just when it seems like Mac is completely out of options and the match is slipping away from him, he suddenly snaps back with sharp focus and wild strength and intense shift that fans know and call by the name Mac Time. In the blink of an eye, Lou gets knocked down, and the match ends with Mac being declared the new champion. Lou is left badly hurt and rushed to the hospital in serious condition. Later, Yuri talks to Joe and admits that he feels guilty for forcing his own dreams onto Lou instead of letting him find his own path. Meanwhile, at home, Mac starts showing strange and aggressive behavior at one point. He even snatches food out of his son Miguel's hands without warning. Maya, who is Mac's wife, shares her worries with Sakuma, hoping for answers, and while he seems understanding at first, he brushes it off by saying that Mac's strange behavior is just because of stress. Meanwhile, Yukiko quietly reflects on her earlier conversation with her brother Mikio, where he told her that Mac Time isn't a special skill but actually a dangerous side effect caused by the BES system affecting Mac's brain in a harmful way. The next day, Santa and Yuri start helping Joe with fixing up Gym Nowhere. While working, Yuri mentions that he also invited Oicho to come along, but she told him she was too busy to show up. Later, Santa turns to Joe and asks him to talk to Lou for him because he really wants to interview him. Since Lou has refused to speak with any other reporters, Santa thinks this could be his perfect chance. But Joe turns him down, saying that he's been out of the ring for a long time now and doesn't want to get involved. Santa quickly replies that it sure didn't look like he was retired when he was in the ring sparring with Lou. Meanwhile, over at the Abuhachi shop, Oicho and the old geezer are working hard together since it's the busiest time of the year for them. As they both stay focused on their tasks, the old man looks over at Oicho and thanks her sincerely, saying her work is really impressive. He admits that he once thought his craftsmanship would disappear with him, but now, he feels hopeful seeing someone like her carrying it on with such skill and care. Meanwhile, Yukiko secretly starts looking into Roscoe and soon finds out that the company has been having serious discussions with the military about using the BES system. She goes straight to Sakuma and confronts him about it. During their talk, Sakuma brings up the idea of implanting brain chips into injured soldiers so they can be sent back into battle, claiming it would lower military costs. Yukiko fires back, saying that's exactly what he already suggested to the military and that it's not something she can accept. She demands that he hand over all the hidden experiment data on Mac if he wants her continued support. She also makes it clear that they need to look deeper into this situation because her brother Mikio has nothing to do with any of it. However, Sakuma appears to agree and promises to send the files, but behind her back, he gives orders to have the data edited and changed before they're shared with her. At the hospital, Lou finally wakes up and the old geezer tells Yuri that the doctors believe Lou might be able to start physical therapy earlier than they first thought, and that he's strong enough to get through this. Yuri responds by saying that ever since Lou opened his eyes, he hasn't shown a single doubt or made any complaints. He always dreamed of having a match like the one he had with Joe, and he finally got it, but just when he was getting close to reaching his full potential, everything came crashing down. Meanwhile, Lou quietly tells Joe that he won't be able to fully recover and that his time in megaloboxing has come to an end. Lou tells Joe that he will not give up, and that they will have a fight as promised. Joe visits Nambu's grave and runs into a still hostile Sachio, who tells Joe that Jim Nowhere died when Joe left years ago and that things cannot go back to normal just because Joe rebuilds the place. When a typhoon threatens the gym, Aragaki and Oicho join the group to help tie down the building. Mac becomes worried about his actions in the ring and his mental deterioration, but Sakuma encourages him to remember why he came back after walking away from megaloboxing. After that, Mac suddenly challenges Joe to a fight, which surprises everyone, especially since in the last match, Joe was just sitting in the audience and not involved. At the same time, Santa rushes over to Joe and shows him the news, saying it's awesome and asking if he's really going to accept the match. But Joe seems unsure and tells him that it must be some kind of mistake, clearly hesitant about the whole thing. Meanwhile, Yukiko speaks to the Shirato group board, who clearly don't look pleased, and announces that she is seriously thinking about cutting ties with Roscoe due to the now public risks and the possible military use of the BES system. She also tells them that Shirato has recently shifted its focus toward the medical field, and that working with a company like Roscoe whose goals seem to be leaning more toward military involvement goes against the direction they should be heading in. She also suggests that they should cancel their deal with Roscoe completely, believing it's the right thing to do. However, some of the board members immediately speak up in disagreement, saying that without Roscoe, the company's value could drop by 50%. Another person on board even worries out loud that without the partnership, Shirato might not survive at all and the entire company could be doomed. Afterward, Roscoe sends their lead researcher, Yoshimura, to meet with Mikio Shirato and pressure him into taking back his thesis that talks about the dangers of the BES system. But Mikio doesn't back down and calmly asks what would happen if he refuses to do that. In response, Yoshimura warns him that Roscoe will have no choice but to take legal action, adding that their company has always had a strong relationship with the school and they wouldn't want to see that connection fall apart because of his actions. Mikio in turn suggests to his former student to accept and fix his mistakes. Meanwhile, Joe spots Mac visiting Lou at the hospital. Joe calmly tells him that their business was settled back in the ring, so there's no need for him to be concerned anymore. Mac then introduces his wife, Maya, and their son, Miguel, to Joe, explaining that his son was born with a serious illness, and the reason he stepped into the ring was to make his son smile. He also opens up about how deeply inspired he was by Joe's journey to become the champion, saying that he's still holding on to the dream Joe once showed him. Later, Lou tells Joe that the most disrespectful thing he could possibly do is to avoid facing Mac and then still choose to fight him anyway. Later on, Joe thinks back to his time with Chief, and it gives him the push he needs to finally decide to fight Mac. Lou then talks to Yuri, who's hesitant, and asks him to help train Joe. He tells Yuri not to blame himself for everything that happened. Joe then goes to see Sachio, and the two ends up having a sudden fight. During it, Joe tells Sachio that it wasn't his fault that Joe lost to Lou or that he left everyone behind years ago. After hearing that, Sachio agrees to return to Gym Nowhere just as Joe suddenly collapses. Joe is taken to the hospital, where the kids and Aragaki find out about how badly megaloboxing and his past painkiller addiction have damaged his body. The doctors say there's no major injury like a blood clot or aneurysm, but it looks like Joe has been dealing with strong headaches for a long time now. However, Aragaki tells the doctor that Joe has stopped using painkillers and said he wasn't getting headaches anymore. But the doctor explains that there's no boxer in the world who doesn't carry some kind of damage or small monster in their brain. Later, Santa and the others arrive at the hospital, but Sachio leaves early to grab his stuff from the drunk monk. When Joe finally opens his eyes, Oicho asks him to promise that he won't lie or keep things from them anymore. Maya receives a call from Asamoto at the Shirado group, who informs her that there may be side effects from the brain chip, and that Mac's condition could be affected. Asamoto also admits that Shirado would share some responsibility if anything goes wrong. He suggests that Maya might have already noticed small changes in Mac that even he hasn't realized. But Maya insists there's nothing unusual. Mac always relaxes after every fight, just like he normally does. Meanwhile, Yukiko holds a press conference where she talks about the goal behind the new foundation they've just launched. She says the mission is to build hospitals in areas where the military has pulled out. Later, in a private conversation, Yukiko tells Asamoto that Mac's son had his surgery around the same time Mac agreed to join the BES treatment program. Afterward, Sakuma arrives on the stage with a fancy entry and invites Yukiko on stage. On the other hand, Sakuma tells Yukiko that Roscoe doesn't plan to break ties with the Shirado group or stop working on BES. At the same time, Yoshimura starts to worry more about how dangerous BES might be. Joe gets out of the hospital soon, and his friends throw a party for him at the new Gym Nowhere to celebrate. During the party, Joe talks about everything that happened while he was out on the road. He says that after he left this place, he ended up fighting in underground rings again. He kept moving from one town to another, and after a while, he even lost track of time. All he could do was keep getting back into the ring, using painkillers to numb the pain he felt inside and out. He also shares that he met a man named Chief along the way and how Chief sadly passed away. Joe tells everyone that he won't keep any secrets from them anymore. Then he asks what they all think about him accepting Mac's challenge, which might be the last fight of his career. Even though they're worried, everyone agrees to respect Joe's decision and help him get ready for the fight. Joe then tells them that he won't be fighting as Gearless, this time he's going to wear Chief's gear instead. Later, Mac has another mental breakdown, and Maya finally tells him the truth. She explains that back when he was paralyzed, she let Roscoe use him in the BES experiment so their sick son could get a heart transplant. After hearing this, Mac goes to confront Sakuma, but Sakuma tells him that Maya made the right decision and that everything Mac has done since then proves it. Mac feels completely hopeless and walks through the streets like a broken, depressed man who believes that someone like him, whose soul feels like it's dying, has nothing left in this world. What makes him feel even worse is remembering that his wife was the one who signed the contract with Roscoe, trading his body for their son's life-saving surgery. The thought of it weighs heavy on him, making him feel even more lost. Joe starts training with Yuri and Aragaki. Aragaki tells him that what he's about to teach isn't just about beating Mac, as it's about learning how to survive the fight and make it back home alive. He also says that Joe will learn how to use defense in a smart way that slowly breaks down his opponent. At the same time, the kids work hard on improving and fitting Chief's gear for Joe. Everyone is impressed by the gear because the leather on the outside helps absorb the impact from punches, which means it'll help reduce the damage Joe takes during the fight. Their focus isn't on beating Mac with force, but on fighting smart and staying defensive, so Joe can make it through the match safely. They all care more about Joe coming back in one piece than winning. Meanwhile, Mac runs into an old friend from his time as a police officer. The man tells him that a lot of people still look up to him not just for the work he did as a cop, but also for what he's done as a megaloboxer. Hearing that leaves Mac quiet and thinking. Mac thinks back on his life and remembers the story of the hummingbird and the Nomad, a tale he used to read to Miguel. In the story, the Nomad keeps wandering, feeling like they've lost everything, but the hummingbird always shows up to remind them of what they still have and sings a song to bring them hope. Remembering this makes Mac realize what truly matters, and he decides to go back home to be with his family. He then tells Sakuma that he's going to do the fight his own way, and once it's over, he'll leave Roscoe behind for good. Soon, the day of the big exhibition match finally arrives. Right before the match, Yukiko tells Sakuma that both of them need to take responsibility for all the harm BES has caused Mac. However, Sakuma asks Yukiko if she's calling everything they did a mistake, but Yukiko answers that she once believed she was a good judge of character and that she was terribly wrong. After that, both fighters walk to the center of the ring as the match is about to start. Joe looks at Mac and tells him that the gear he's wearing once belonged to a man who chased his dreams and lived them fully. Right after that, the bell rings, and the first round of the fight begins. It's also revealed that Yoshimura secretly gave the real data about Mac's condition to Mikio and Yukiko. It turns out that Mac and Maya had reached out to them, asking for help to bring out the truth and make sure the fight can be finished without Mac going into Mac time again. Although Joe and Mac are pretty evenly matched at the start of the fight, Joe is the first one to go down because his body isn't in the best shape. But he manages to get back up and even knocks Mac down afterward. Mac keeps thinking about his family during the fight, and that gives him the strength to keep going without needing to enter Mac time at all. As the two fighters keep landing hits on each other, Sachio throws in the towel just like he had promised Joe he would if things got too dangerous. Mac is then declared the winner of the match. Yukiko announces that she's going to make the BES technology open to the world, so anyone can work on it and use it to help others. After making that decision, she steps down from her position at the company, and Sakuma ends up getting arrested. Lou starts his rehab training with Yuri, slowly working to get stronger again. Joe goes back to Gym Nowhere to be with his friends and find peace. Later, they all gather to say goodbye to Sachio, who decides it's time to leave the gym so he can chase his original dream of becoming a gear engineer. How long do you think it'll take for Joe to find peace after everything he's been through? Comment your thoughts below and make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more.